So if you want to really embolden Ukraine, we really need to stop the talking circus and get into the doing mood. I would also add, we should really do this without constantly looking at what President Trump says today, tomorrow, or the day after.
Now, on his flight back to Washington, D.C. on Air Force One, President Trump held a lengthy call with President Zelensky, along with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and other European leaders of NATO countries. After the summit, Trump told Fox News host Sean Hannity that no deal can be made without Zelensky.
It's not a done deal at all. And Ukraine has to agree. I mean, President Zelensky has to agree. But it's a terrible war where he's losing a lot, and both of them are. And hopefully it can get completed. That'll be a great achievement for them. Forget about me, for them. And you'll save 7,000 lives a week. That's a lot.
The sentiment was underlined this morning in a joint statement from the leaders of the European Commission, France, Italy, Germany, the UK, Finland, Poland, and the European Council, who all said that the next step must now be further talks, including President Zelensky. And they are ready to work with President Trump and Zelensky towards a trilateral summit with European support. Well, joining us now with her thoughts is Stefanie Babst, a former NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General. Stefanie, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, and thank you for having me, Alexis.
Stefanie, Sir Keir Starmer said this morning that President Trump's efforts have brought us closer than ever before to ending the war in Ukraine. Do you agree?
No, I can't, actually. For me, looking at the summit in Alaska yesterday was more of an orchestration of the complicity of two cartel chiefs who met in order to carve out their respective stakes, who brought their teams together in order to sound out where and how they could advance their converging interests. And Ukraine clearly mattered, but it didn't really matter in the sense that it mattered for us, or it matters for the Ukrainians rather, because it's clear that President Trump has given so many concessions to Putin already. He added one more. In fact, earlier this morning, he has switched sides, something which I said already 6 months ago when I was on your show in February.
Do you not think, though, Stefanie, that at least there is now this possibility of getting Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky in a room together, with or without Trump? But that has to be the first step, doesn't it?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the aggressor meets the president of the victimized country, of the one country who is permanently terrorized militarily for the past 3.5 months. I personally would like to see President Putin being rather in front of a court than meeting with President Zelensky. But this is not likely to happen. So yes, having a conversation, a serious conversation, may be helpful. But we've heard yesterday, listening to President Putin, that he has not altered an inch from his broader strategic objectives, from his demands. What he spelled out in the press conference was exactly what he has said many, many times before. These were his maximum demands. And President Trump even seconded him this morning while saying we should drop the idea of having a ceasefire first and then start negotiating about the various issues, but rather now look for a broad agreement. And that's the broad peace agreement President Putin has been advocated ever since.
Do you think this has turned up the pressure now on NATO? We heard earlier this week from Vice President J.D. Vance that America is likely to focus its attentions elsewhere, and that Ukraine is something that's happening, as he put it, on Europe's doorstep. They're happy for NATO and NATO members, European countries, to spend their money on American arms manufacturers, but he reiterated that the American taxpayer is not happy seeing their tax dollars go to Ukraine. Is this the time now for NATO to actually step up and be almost the sole provider of protection for Ukraine?
Absolutely. As you said, the Americans have made very clear that Ukrainians only get aid for hard US dollars, for cash. If we Europeans are capable and willing to provide these cash sums and put them into Washington's pocket, I mean, they may be willing to continue sharing even military intelligence data or other critical capabilities. But if we are not, I mean, they will stop altogether. I think that was pretty obvious already a couple of weeks or even months ago. And that has put the spotlight back on us. In fact, we always were in the spotlights. My argument has always been that we haven't even started to help Ukraine win ever since Russia started with its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We've provided bit by bit military capabilities here and there, very often too late, very often only half. So we have not really been that serious. So if you want to really embolden Ukraine, we really need to stop the talking circus and get into the doing mood. I would also add, we should really do this without constantly looking at what President Trump says today, tomorrow, or the day after, because he has made up his mind. He wants to reset relations with Putin on a much broader scale and forget about Ukraine as soon as this can be in any way possible.
Stephanie, is that a failure then of NATO? Is that a failure of Secretary General Mark Rutte? Is that a failure of the so-called coalition of the willing? It seems to me you're saying there's a lot more they can do, but they're not doing it.
No, we don't do it. I mean, we
Why?
keep on talking about it because I think there are two schools of thought in some capitals. One is, I mean, that we simply have to outweigh President Trump in the sense that hopefully there will be a change of power or political dynamics in Washington following the midterm elections. And then hopefully he will disappear or become politically weaker. That's one school of thought that I keep on hearing in some capitals. The other school of thought is we can't possibly imagine a future, a security and defense related future without the United States. Yes, as some ambassador told me some weeks ago, President Trump is really a moron. I just quoted what I heard. And he is absolutely impossible. And yes, he is a corrupt cartel chief, but we are dependent on him. So there are really many people in capitals, including in my country, who simply really refuse to think a future with less of the United States. And I keep on arguing the opposite and say, well, you know, the train has already left the station. We need to prepare for a future with less of the United States in Europe, and perhaps even in opposition with the United States, as we have now encountered with Ukraine.
Stephanie, thank you for giving us your thoughts. Always good to speak to you. Stefanie Babst there, former NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General, speaking to us about that meeting yesterday between President Trump and President Putin.